feel like for everybody's time, we'll get started right away. As an introduction, my name is Christina Park. I am the Director of Guidance here at the high school. I have with me Diane Place. She is the Financial Aid Admissions Representative at Bridgewater State. I forget your
Financial aid, yeah.
Yes. First, I'm going to show you a couple things that we've worked on with our seniors already. We met with them twice in groups, and now each counselor is meeting with their seniors individually to work on their specific plans. Please check with your seniors. Feel free to pick up PowerPoint up. Please check with your seniors to see where they're at in the process. Have a look at the Canvas page, which I'm going to show you in a second, and ask them to see their green folders. If they're thinking of applying early deadlines, those deadlines are fastly approaching, and we are working with them to get those applications out. We want to make sure that they are out well before that October 15th deadline, which is sometimes those southern schools have that, or November 1st is a more popular early action deadline, and a lot of our seniors do have those deadlines. So check in with your kiddos, make sure that they are on track. We are also meeting with them frequently. This is our Canvas page, and there are a bunch of different resources on this page. I'm only going to show you a couple things. This financial aid page right here is where we are going to post the PowerPoint presentation after today. And then it has some helpful resources in regard to financial aid, like the MIFA website, the FAFSA where you're going to fill out the form for financial aid, and then the CSS profile, which is a website that some private colleges use for the financial aid process. So you can get quick links here if you look at your students' Canvas page. In regard to scholarships, scholarship season doesn't really start until winter time, but there are a couple of good websites that we want you to be aware of. Fastweb.com is a scholarship search engine. You create a profile, and then it generates some scholarships that your student could fit the criteria for, and it's free. So that's a good one to look at. We also post all the scholarships that come our way on this page. Again, a lot of scholarships don't come to us until like January, February, March, so we'll keep adding them as they come to us. But there's also this scholarship newsletter, which has scholarships from all over the country that we encourage our students to sign up for that newsletter so that they can pay attention to those types of scholarships as well. So that is on the Canvas page under the scholarships tab, and then there's that financial aid tab as well, which has the helpful resources and websites to help you through this process. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Diane, because she is the expert.
Okay. I should be an expert. I've been at it for a long time. And sorry, I'm going to try to vocalize as much as I possibly can. I'm coming down a little cold, but I did not want to cancel because these things are very hard to reschedule, so I'll just apologize ahead of time. So one of the things that I do want to let you know is that you can connect with MIFA, the Massachusetts Education Finance Authority, and receive all of their emails, which are very, very timely. They can give you reminders of, oh, it's time to do this, or it's time to do that, or we're offering this service, and all of their services are free. I don't work for MIFA. I work for Bridgewater State University, for the state, really, so if you're a taxpayer, I already work for you. I don't get paid to come here, so I'm not here to promote anything or get anything out of it. The reason that I volunteer my time is because I feel that it's important for you to hear the information from the people who are actually doing the work. And so that is why I'm here. So you can use the QR code, and we'll see what's next. Connecting with your email. I think that's the same one, right? Yep. Okay, so here are just a little bit of other things. You can connect with MIFA through all of their different social media outlets. So a little bit about them. They were created in 1982. I was already working in financial aid at that time, believe it or not. I know, I shouldn't even say that. It was created at the request of local colleges and universities so that there would be a hub of information available that was timely and accurate and free for students and families in Massachusetts, and that's why they were created. So tonight we're going to be talking about the different types and sources of financial aid, the application process, how the decisions are made, paying for college, and what you can actually do now. Has anybody checked out the financial aid, the FAFSA website yet? Yay, we get a couple of winners in the back there. So the FAFSA just opened up yesterday. So I don't know, we didn't hear anything about the site crashing or anything like that, so I think that's kind of good news. So anyway, I digress, sorry. So what is financial aid? Obviously, it's money that helps students and families pay for college, and there are three main types. You have your grant and scholarships, which are, it's gift aid. So those are the types of aid that everybody wants. It never has to be repaid. There's federal work study, which is a fund that is allotted to schools, and then they will award a certain amount of money per student. Then the student is able to get a job on campus and earn a little bit of money in the form of a paycheck. It also gives students some really good experience. When I said I was an aide in 1982, I might have been a work study student at that time, but I was working in financial aid. So, it just turned into something that I really had a passion for, and it turned into a really great career for me. So work study, good thing. Federal student loans, a lot of people don't like to talk about loans. However, it is a part of the financial aid offer. And when the student completes the application, they're considered for all types of aid, including loans, but there's never an obligation for them to accept the loans, okay? So a lot of times, a student will go to a community college or a lower price college, and they don't have a need for the loan, even if it's part of the offer. So they can always decline any offer of a loan. So a little bit more about loans. The student is the sole borrower, so there's no credit checking, there's no co-signing. The repayments are deferred until after the student leaves school, 6 months after they leave school or graduate. It could be subsidized or unsubsidized, and for this year, the loan interest rate was fixed at 6.39%. It's gone up and down. I've seen it as high as 8.25, which I believe is the cap. And I've seen it as low as like 2.92, I think. So it's kind of runs the gamut. And the feds will set the rate for next year, which is where your students will be entering college. Usually right around the end of June, the beginning of July is when we'll find out what that is. So no payments while a student is enrolled. There are lots of different repayment options. A lot of them are tied to earnings once the student graduates. If the student borrows the standard amount, which are listed right here, they will have borrowed a total of $27,000 by the end of a 4-year degree. They can borrow up to $31,000, but that's the standard amount is $27,000. So the estimated payments for that would be $300 a month if the student just chose a standard repayment plan without any income options. So the total estimated debt would be between $32,000 and $34,000. That's with interest once it's paid off. But there are lots of deferment options, forbearance, and did I say forgiveness? Yeah, deferment, forbearance, and forgiveness. Particularly for people who are working in public service and teachers. There's student loan forgiveness, the federal loan, so it's a decent program. So the federal government sets the limit on how much students can borrow. So for their freshman year, it's up to $5,500, and then it goes up to $65,000 for a sophomore, and then $7,500 each for junior and senior years. So you will see these typical amounts on an aid offer letter. So the different sources of financial aid would be the federal government, where you can see your grant work study, loans, tax incentives. The state of Massachusetts, so when the student completes the application for financial aid, if they indicate that they are a resident of Massachusetts or whatever state they're in, their information will automatically get sent to their state financial agency as well. The college or universities that are listed on the application will receive it, and they're, or is the source of aid, and then other agencies would be any type of scholarship. So I would encourage you and your students to look all over for scholarships. The MIFA pathway has some links there. The FastWeb was already mentioned. Look everywhere, but don't pay anyone to do a search for you because these search engines are free. Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff. You might start getting stuff through the mail or email probably, or maybe even on your phone. about, come to the seminar and we'll guarantee you the most financial aid you can get. But then they charge you a pretty large fee for that. That happened when my daughter was in high school. So you don't need to, you can go to the seminar, but you don't want to get hooked into paying for anything, okay? No, that's okay. I was just going to mention the bottom line here. In 23-24, there was over $190 billion of financial aid awarded to students. And one other thing I just want to mention about scholarships is that students really should apply everywhere, because every year there are scholarships that go unclaimed. Either there's no one that fits the criteria or students are not applying. So look everywhere and apply for, everything. Even a $500 scholarship will help to pay for books. It's never a waste. Okay. So merit-based aid is something that is awarded not by every school, but it is awarded to students based on something unique about that student, whether it's athletic or academic or artistic. So, and it's very competitive, so students are actually competing for this type of merit aid. It's generally limited. So it's not offered at every college, so you want to look at the college's websites. So once you get your financial aid applications done, it'll be done for this year, you really want to concentrate on looking at the college's website. So you can check deadlines, which is very, very important. You'll hear me say that over and over. What types of forms are needed. So you really get a lot of information once you hone in on those favorite colleges. Merit aid may or may not be renewable, so that's a question that you'd want to ask. If your student has a merit, some type of merit aid offered on a letter, you'd want to find out what does it take to be renewed year after year. Is there a GPA requirement? Is there a certain major? Do they get it because they're a history major or a science major? So those are the questions that you want to ask. Sometimes there are separate applications, but not always. And again, check your deadlines. And some deadlines may be as early as November. And so the need-based aid is based on financial eligibility, also known as need. Most aid that's offered is need-based aid. It includes the grants, the loans, and the work study. Students must be making satisfactory academic progress. So not only does a student demonstrate their financial need, they also need to be making progress toward graduation over time. So everyone comes in with a clean record, but then students have the option sometimes to withdraw from a class, or they sometimes drop out of a semester completely. There are very good reasons why students do this. But they can lose their eligibility for financial aid over time. But there is an appeal process for that. Okay, we know full well there are lots of legitimate reasons why students withdraw. Major sickness, death in the family, lots of different things. So there is an appeal process for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about the application process. Can everyone hear me up there? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Does everybody have a PowerPoint? We do have printed ones. If you need a PowerPoint, they're right on the.
I noticed the print is really small. Can you guys actually see that?
Sorry, I wanted to give you room for notes, but then I realized what's on there is you can't really see it.
I was trying to take medicine before I left, and I had to whip out my magnifying glass. I'm like, starting to get to that point. Okay, so the highlighting is for me, compliments for me. So you really want to check the required deadlines, okay? The FAFSA is out. You don't really need to wait. It's based on 2024 income, which are your taxes that have already been done. So there really isn't a good reason to wait, okay? You don't have to rush home and do it tonight, but perhaps maybe over the weekend, or you get a long weekend or something, try to get it done as early as possible. So you will likely apply for financial aid before the student is actually admitted to any of their favorite schools. You don't have to be admitted to list a school on the application. So list all of your favorite schools. You can list up to 10, I believe, and then you can, once your application is processed, you can go back and add more if you need to. Early action decision deadlines are often in October or November, so get those FAFSAs done. Standard deadlines typically in February or March. I know a lot of the Rhode Island schools have February deadlines. A lot of the schools in Massachusetts have March 1. That's what we have at Bridgewater. Meet the deadlines, and you can use the NEFA's College Application Manager to stay organized. It's just a little tool that you can go in and list your colleges and kind of check boxes of, I've done this, I've done that, oh, I need to do that. So stay organized. So the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. That is what it stands for. Its first name is free, So there is no fee for filing it. If you happen to get on a fake website, I hope you don't, make sure you exit before submitting any money, credit cards, anything like that, okay? It is the free application for federal student aid. The website ends in .gov, okay? It's studentaid.gov, so you'll know you're on the correct website. It's required by all colleges if your student is applying for financial aid. Some colleges have 2 applications. They use the FAFSA and the profile, which I believe I talk about next. But every school requires the FAFSA. It must be completed every year, so it's not a once and done. It's available October 1st, which was yesterday. So you can go to, it says FAFSA.gov, it's actually studentaid.gov, but you can get there from FAFSA.gov. Be sure that you're selecting the 26-27 FAFSA. That is for students who are entering college in the fall, in September of 26. Right now, there are 2 active applications. The current application for students who are already enrolled in college is still active, and this one is available as well. So make sure that you're clicking on the right application. Have the student start the FAFSA. And the reason that we say this is because they changed the way that the FAFSA is done a couple of years ago. So the student starts the FAFSA, and then they invite their contributors, which are typically their parents or guardians, whatever, to fill out their portion. So the student creates the application, and then the parents will receive an email invite with a code that they can put in and then link back up to the student's FAFSA. It's very private, so the student doesn't see what the parent is inputting, and the information doesn't flow back either way. So it's kind of a nice upgrade that they did a few years ago. Each contributor will complete their own section. The last contributor to complete it will submit the FAFSA, but if it lays inactive for 45 days, it will be deleted. So you don't want to delay. When your student sends you the invite, you kind of want to get right on that. Alrighty. So the FSA ID, the Federal Student Aid ID, is the ID that needs to be created by each student who's filling out a FAFSA, and at least one parent if the parents have filed a joint tax return. If the parents have separate tax returns, then each parent will need their own FSA ID. If you are a parent who has multiple children going to school at the same time, number 1, I feel a little bad for you. Number 2, you can use your FSA ID to sign those multiple FAFSA forms, but each of the students needs their own. And that is something that you can do right now. So you have to have an FSA ID to log in. It is created using your name, date of birth, and social security number, I believe. You have to have an email address. And so who needs it? The student. Every parent who's listed on the FAFSA. Again, I already said this. If the parent files joint tax return, only one parent needs the FSA ID because the information from both will be transmitted automatically. The student's spouse, if we had any married students applying, the spouse would also need one. Anyone without not a student, but any parent without a social security number will be able to answer certain questions so that they can also create an FSA ID. They pull it from credit history. That's for any parent who doesn't have a social. So what is on the FAFSA? General information, things that you would expect. Name, date of birth, address, all of those things. Student citizenship status. So all U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens can receive federal aid. Undocumented students may be eligible for some Massachusetts state aid, but they would not qualify for federal aid. There is a separate application for Massachusetts students in that situation. The college where the student is applying, because each one of them will receive the FAFSA. The parents, married parents, including same gender, include both. All parents who live together, whether they're married or not. Divorced or separated parents. The parent who provided the most financial support and their spouse is the one who puts their information on the FAFSA. And sometimes we get the question, oh, what if it's equal? It's exactly equal. It's usually not exactly equal, but if that's the case, the federal rule is the parent who has the greater income. Just going to say that. Legal guardians are not parents. So if you are the legal guardian of a student or you have a foster child living in your home, then as the legal guardian, you would not be required to report your information on the FAFSA. That student would be considered independent and would report only their income. Okay? The number in household is going to be pulled from your IRS data. So they will go by the number of dependents that are listed on the tax return. So if it's a spouse, husband and wife, whatever, man, woman, whatever it is, 2 parents. And then you have, 4 children, it would automatically give you a household size of 6, okay? That's how it works. If your household size is different from what's coming in through the IRS, you can put that in manually. Sometimes in a case where divorced parents, they take turns claiming certain dependents every other year. So your house, it may not be the same. Does that make sense, gentlemen? It's automatically going to populate from your tax return, and if it's different, you can update that manually. The number of children that are going to college, they also ask that information, but it's not considered in the formula. They changed that a couple of years ago. Financial information, of course, you would expect that. So information for the parent and the student from the 2024 income will pull automatically federal data from the IRS once you give your consent. That's what the consent and the contributing is all about. So you have your FSA ID, your student creates the FAFSA, they invite you to be a contributor, and once you log in, you are giving your consent to have your information transferred directly from the IRS into the FAFSA. It's a pretty good system. Taxed and untaxed income that appears on the tax return. Now, I just want to make a quick note about this. I just ran into this situation today. Sometimes if a parent changes jobs and you have your 401k, or some type of pension plan, you take from one employer and you start it with your new employer. So on your tax return, it looks like a withdrawal, but then it says rollover next to it. So that will show up as untaxed income on your FAFSA. If you have a rollover, you need to notify the school. There is a place to report rollover, but if you don't see it or you're unsure, notify the school that we can make sure that it gets input correctly. It made a big difference for a student that I discovered through a different process. He came in to see me and I said, well, let's take a look and see what's going on here. And then I figured out that it was a substantial rollover that was reported as untaxed income. So it was reported incorrectly, and it really affected the student's eligibility. Parent and student assets. So the value of savings, checking accounts, investments, a larger business except for a commercial fishing business, and other property. So if you had, say, a second home somewhere, that would be other property. You include only an education savings account for the student who's on the FAFSA. So if you have multiple children and they each have their own education savings plan, you only need to report the value of the student who's on the FAFSA, not all the other children. They changed that a couple of years ago. You would report that as an asset under the parent, not the student, because it really is more favorable that way. The parent's assets count less heavily than the student's assets. And generally speaking, it's the parents who've been contributing to the education savings plan. You don't include the value of your primary home or the value of your retirement or any life insurance, a family farm, a small business, which would be less than 100 employees, I believe, or a commercial fishing business. Child support received by the family is reported as an asset. That was a change that was made a few years ago, and it's actually much more favorable because in the formula, income counts a lot more heavily than assets. So you get a little bit of a break by putting the child support as an asset. Debt is not reported anywhere on the FAFSA except as it relates to an asset. And what I mean by that is, let's say you do have a second home and the value of it is $500,000 and the mortgage is owed on it is still $250,000. So the net value would be the $250,000. So you can subtract the debt that's owed on an asset. That's what that means. Okay. So other financial aid applications would be the CSS profile, also available on October 1, which I believe was yesterday. It is required by some colleges and universities, but not all. So you really want to check your college's websites. A lot of the bigger private schools request the profile because they ask for a lot more detailed information. They may ask information about retirement plans or primary home value or debt, some things of that nature. And so they can customize the form to include information that they really want to get at. I went to a very interesting training about the profile, and they were saying that it's not that they're trying to find out everything about you to keep, so they don't have to give you as much money. It's because they want to be sure that they're giving their money to the people who really need it the most. So that's what's behind the profile and why they ask so many other questions. There is a fee for that particular application. It's $25 for the first school, $16 for each additional. But there are fee waivers if the parent income is $100,000 or less. So once you start filling out the profile, if you qualify for a fee waiver, it will automatically let you know at that time. The minute you qualify, it lets you know. So October 1, already out. Unlike the FAFSA that does not require information about a non-custodial parent, the CSS profile may, in fact, request it. But they have their own separate profile. The two are never mixed together, so that information is private. So MIFA also has what to know about the profile webinar if you want to log in and kind of go through that. Their webinars are actually very good. They're not too boring. Just kidding. Yeah, so I think that was all I was going to say about that. So after you apply, the colleges that you've listed on your applications will receive your information. The student will also receive by email a FAFSA submission summary. I always have to look for that because it's kind of a tongue twister for me. Colleges may be requesting additional documentation due to mandatory verification. So if your student's application, your FAFSA application, is selected for verification, it's not a punishment, it's a random selection, and it will be required by every college who's listed there to collect the verification documentation. Okay, that's the federal rule, and we're required to do it. The colleges will review the applications and determine the aid offer. Financial aid may be sent with the admissions offer or later. So sometimes if a student receives merit aid, they'll receive the offer of the merit aid with their admission letter, and then it'll come, they'll have a financial aid offer that will come later. So that happens once in a while. You just really want to look at the school's timing to figure out when that happens. So a little bit more about verification. We are required to do it. If your information is transferred directly from the IRS, it makes it much easier to do the verification. Because if everything is right, everything is already there. It's already verified. But the colleges can request tax return transcripts, verification worksheets, which they will supply, and sometimes asset information as well. So if the application is selected for verification, just make sure that you're following up with that. Have a way to keep track of the colleges that you've sent the information to. Another form of verification is the statement of educational purpose and identification. So some students are only required to provide a copy of their government-issued ID, like a license or a passport, some type of verification in that nature. The feds have a couple of different ways that they do it. So you just want to review all your information from the colleges, log into the portal to figure out what's needed, and just make sure that you're really staying on top of that. Okay, so the financial aid office. Learn about your office, how it works with different colleges. Don't be afraid to call or to contact us. We're kind of friendly, really. You can talk about a lot of different things, financial aid renewability criteria, how would a private scholarship affect their aid. So let's say you receive your financial aid package, and then your student receives a private scholarship later on. You can call, tell them how much it is, and ask, is this going to affect the aid package or not? Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. Ask about special considerations. So sometimes where the FAFSA is collecting information about 2024, perhaps there was a change in the family's situation. Either the dynamics of the family or the income in 25 or even 26, if that's the case, you can notify the financial aid office individually. There's no place to report that on the FAFSA. That is something that you could write in. You could write an email, you could call and say, how do you handle this? And then we look at every request and then take it from there. Sometimes we have to request a lot more documents, but it's something that we do on a regular basis. Ask if you can appeal the offer. So sometimes colleges have deadlines, maybe you missed a deadline by a day or two. You know, is there an appeal process for that? These are the things that you want to communicate. And you can communicate either by phone, email, or sometimes they'll have a chat. If it's not a live chat, I don't know. I don't really like the chats. Does anybody get those AI responses? Like, that's not even what I asked, right? Yeah, I would say call or email. Get a better response that way. Okay, so how the decisions are made. The thing that we look at first is the cost of attendance. And that includes things that you would naturally expect. Tuition and fees, food and housing for students who live on campus, but we also have an allowance for students who live at home. And then books and supplies, transportation, and personal expenses. The difference between this is what is going to show up on the bill and what is assumed. Okay, so these are non-billable expenses, okay? If your student is going to be a commuter, the bill will only reflect the tuition and fees. However, we do allow a cost for living because we know that you're feeding them and they're living with you, so you're providing that support. So there's a built-in cost, but it's not necessarily on your bill. We also know that students need books and supplies. They have to get back and forth to school at least a few times, right? Even if they live there. And then personal expenses. So those types of things will not show up on your bill, but they're included in the assumed cost, okay? So we start with the cost of attendance. And then we look at the student aid index. That is the number that is produced once the student files the FAFSA. It is it's a number that represents the family's financial strength. It's the same formula for every family. So that means the federal formula treats everyone the same. There are cost of living allowances built into the formula, but they're not specific to a particular family. They're very, very general. Income weighs more heavily than assets. I actually already said that, just to let you know again. Some colleges will also use an institutional formula or an additional formula, and that comes from the CSS profile that I talked about. The family has the primary responsibility for paying. That's the premise behind it. It's not necessarily what the family will pay because of those assumed expenses that I talked about a minute ago. You can look for an SAI calculator if you want to figure out what it will be, but you can also just fill out the FAFSA because it's available now. So here's the formula. We start with the cost of attendance. We subtract the student aid index, and that is what gives us the financial aid eligibility, okay? The negative SAI, because sometimes the student aid index can be a negative number. It can be 0 up to, or down to perhaps negative 1,500, but it is counted as a 0 for our formula, okay? So this one has a, yeah. So we're going to start with a college cost of $45,000. And what's happening here is the first thing we do is we fill in, we subtract out the student aid index, and then we fill in some of that eligibility with grant and scholarship money. There's that student loan of $5,500, that would be for a freshman. There's an offer of work study, and then there's some unmet need. So this is the basic formula of how it's awarded. So the unmet need and the SAI would be the family's responsibility. But again, not necessarily what the family will pay because it's based on the cost of attendance that includes those non-billed expenses, okay? All right. So you'll find net price calculators on the college's different websites. So what you want to find out is, okay, we've got this cost of attendance, we've got this SAI, we have an offer, but what's the bottom line here? That's where you can figure that out. It is very specific to the students. It will ask personal questions about the family finances and also the students' academics. That way it could provide merit aid, federal aid. just an estimate, based on the price. So that'll give you kind of like the bottom line. It's just an estimator, it's not a solid guarantee, but it'll kind of give you a good idea of what to expect. Okay, so this is where a financial aid offer, where the totals can vary, okay? And I'm going to explain what that means. So we're going off the premise of a $45,000 cost of attendance. We've got that nice round number, the 5,000 EFC. So we have 40,000 of eligibility or need, okay? Same thing. So the first, we're going to look at College A. Over here, it has a nice offer of $32,500 for grant and scholarship. So yeah, we like that a lot. That could be a combination of federal grants, state grants, and perhaps some merit aid and grants from the college itself. And then they have offered the student loan, okay, pretty standard on every letter. An offer of work study for a total of $40,000. So in this particular case, they have met the student's full eligibility. Then we have College B, again, it's the same cost, a little bit less here in the offer, so perhaps they don't have as large of an endowment, or perhaps the student didn't receive the merit aid at that particular college. So it's a little bit less, still a good offer. You've got your $5,500 loan, you've got your work study for a total of $33,000. So you do have some unmet need here, okay? But again, this could be some of those non-billable expenses. You don't want to rule out a school just because you think the cost is too high initially. You want to wait till you see the offers and see what happens. And then College C, again, same cost. We've got a different offer of grants here. We've got the same for the loans, the work study, and a little bit more. Actually, I don't think that math is right, is it? Yeah, that's the total, $25,000. So you have a little bit more unmet need. And again, it just varies by school. It depends on timing. Perhaps this is the school had an earlier deadline and it was missed. I mean, we don't really know what the reasoning behind it is. But just to show you that even though the SAI is the same, the school cost is the same, the offers can vary greatly by school. All right, this was one of my favorites now. So this one is showing us how when the totals are all the same, okay, we have the same total here, we're offering $35,000 across the board, the same unmet need here. But what I want to point out to you is the source of aid, okay? So College A has always been our favorite because they're giving us the most money over there. You've got your loans, and down the line. We're still getting a good amount of grant here. You've got your student loan, but look at these two. You see that right there? Parent loan, $10,000 and $20,000. So some schools will automatically package a parent loan to show you how you can afford to send your student there. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed the loan, or that you applied for the loan, or that you even want the loan. It's simply a way of showing how to get to this bottom line here. Okay, so the source of aid, where it's coming from, grant, scholarship, loan, very, very important that you're looking at those designations. And for transparency, they're supposed to be separated out. So you have your gift aid, your self-help, which is the loans, and your work study. So just make sure that you pay attention to that, okay? Yeah, we don't want to be deceived by that. Okay, paying for college, we're getting there. So if there was a balance of $20,000, it's just an example, there's a few different things that you can do, okay? You can pay from savings. I always say it's never too early or too late to start saving. We have the whole rest of this academic year, we have the summer, and just with it in your mind, say, you know what, we're not gonna do our Friday night pizza. We're gonna put that money aside, and that's gonna be our thing. We're gonna save that. Whatever your little plan is, try to save as much money as possible. Saving money up front is gonna save you from paying interest on loans down the line. So any amount that can be saved and put toward a bill, very good. You can also pay out of current wages, which is a payment plan. Most colleges offer some type of payment plan where you can take your bill, make a lump sum payment perhaps from savings, apply the financial aid, and then whatever's left you can put on a monthly payment plan without interest. Or you can borrow some other type of education loan. So when I was pointing out the PLUS loans in the previous slide, I'm not trying to say that a PLUS loan, a parent loan, is a bad loan. It's not a bad loan at all. It's actually a very good loan. A lot of people can be approved for it. It has a fixed interest rate. It's a competitive loan, and it's not a bad loan at all. The previous slide was just to show you that you need to just pay attention to that, because if you're not prepared to borrow, you don't want to make it look like you can go there without borrowing. However, if you are prepared to borrow and you're willing to borrow, a PLUS loan is not a bad loan at all. And the only problem with that is if you are a first-time parent borrower, there's a limit of $20,000 per year per student. So if that's not enough to make that bill, you're going to need another source, okay? I'm just going to put in a shameless plug for MIFA here because they are a nonprofit. They do make loans. Their loans are very competitive as well. A lot of times their interest rates are even lower than the PLUS, but their approval criteria is a little bit stricter. So if you're a parent with a good credit score, the MIFA loan might be the way to go, particularly if you're going to need more than $20,000. If you're looking at one of some of those more higher priced schools. Okay, and you can do a combination of all of these things. You can do one or the other, or you can do all of them. All right. So, family conversations about affordability. You kind of want to have something in your mind about what you are willing to pay for and what your students' goals are for the future. You really want to kind of look at the net price, who's going to be paying for the college costs, like is the student taking some responsibility by taking their student loans or saving over the summers. You could consider a community college. It's free in Massachusetts, so students in Massachusetts and even their older adults can go to a community college for zero cost, and that's a great savings. Is a community college for everyone? No, but it is a really good opportunity for a lot of people, so I'm just going to put that out there. It's very easy to transfer from a community college to a four-year state school as well, and you've saved your first 2 years, worth a shot. Consider the number of children in the family that are going to college. I'm the oldest in my family, and so I knew there was 4 others like trailing not too far behind, just a couple of years apart. And the community college was the way for me to go because I knew that there was going to be some other college costs coming up for my parents. So that was a good decision for me. Make a 4-year financing plan, so you need to figure out, it's not just borrowing for the first year, but you may have to be borrowing for the whole 4 years. The PLUS, yeah, I already said that. They're capped for first-time PLUS borrowers. They're capped at $20,000 for the year, $65,000 in total. So think in terms of total debt for 4 years, and also consider the student's starting salary. Okay, sometimes a student has great aspirations of being, great things, social work, teachers. They don't always make a lot of money when they start working. So to come out, in a lower paying job and then have a lot of debt, you really kind of want to help them weigh those options out. Okay, paying for college in Massachusetts. Mass Educate is free community college, tuition and fees, potentially a book allowance as well for all students. Mass Reconnect is free community college for adults over 25. This year, the state of Massachusetts really expanded their Mass Grant and Mass Grant Plus programs. We have a lot of students, even at the 4-year school, who are having their full tuition and fees paid, okay? I don't know if any of you, I'm just going to put a shameless plug for Bridgewater here. If any of you have heard of the Bridgewater Commitment. Last year was the first year that it was launched, and we plan to continue it for this coming year for families whose income is $125,000 or less can go to the school for tuition and fees will be covered. So that's a pretty good deal at the 4-year school. It does not cover housing, but it does cover tuition and fees. That's a good deal. And a lot of that is because we got the money from the Mass Grant Plus and the expansion. So you can also check out the tuition equity law, and that is for the students who may be undocumented, and there is money for them as well. Mass transfer, I briefly mentioned that. It makes transferring from a community college to the state colleges very, very easy. And then there are also some tuition breaks for schools that have reciprocal agreements, usually New England schools. So I know a lot of I think the schools in Rhode Island can come at a discounted price if they're in certain programs. Same with like New Hampshire and a few other states. So you just want to check that out too. And we're almost there. So what you can do now, stay on track through the senior year. So you want to get yourselves organized, figure out a way. I think they have the green folder, is it?
Yes, we do.
Got the green folder. Is the school color green? Is that why?
Yes.
Okay, well, I figured that out.
Green wave.
Okay. So make it part of that, put an extra piece in there to stay on track. I don't know what's in there. But really, just stay organized, stay on track. Visit college campuses. At Bridgewater, we have tours. If you haven't been there lately, you may be pleasantly surprised. It's a beautiful, beautiful campus. I go there every day, and every day I get out of my car and I walk up and I'm like, I love working here. It's so nice. Ask your teacher for letters of recommendation, take the SATs. I mean, I'm not going to go through all of this. This is beyond financial aid, but you have a little snapshot there of the different things that you can do. But yeah, do some college tours and get some swag. Once the students are admitted, the colleges have these admitted student days, which are really, really fun. And you can, like I said, you can get a bunch of swag, you get some t-shirts, you can get all kinds of cool stuff. We have our little hand sanitizer sprays, all kinds of cool little things. But you really get a feel for the students and the staff, and you can take your financial aid and you can talk to people there. So check out some of those as well, even though that wasn't part of this. So here you go. Get your FSA ID for the student and the parent. Research the deadlines and the required applications. Don't delay on that. Complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile if needed. And then you can use the QR codes to use any of MIFA's services. And again, like I said, I don't work for them, but they're nonprofit, and their information is just outstanding. Every time I go to one of their trainings, I learn things. And I already told you I've been doing this since 1982. And I still learn when I go to their trainings. They're that good. So I would highly recommend that. And don't let my voice be the only one that you hear tonight. If you have an opportunity to go to some other type of seminar or presentation or something, then please do. This is a lot to take in. Ask questions. If you have a particular school, I had someone on the phone today, and their student is only applying to one school. And I said, "Are you sure about that?" Yep, they're only applying to the one school. So you know what? Call the school and ask all the questions that you want to ask. Okay? Because that's where you're going to get your best source of information. I think that we're pretty much done. Look at that. I've got us 10 minutes early. I don't know how that happened. If anyone has any questions, if there was anything that was unclear or anything you want to go back to, oh yes.
Do you know anything about the grandfathers or grandparents' clause for student?
529, so if the 529
I do.
is opened by the grandparent.
I do. So the question is, do I know anything about the grandparent? Is it called the grandparent clause? I didn't know I had a name.
Something like
So if a grandparent is the owner of a 529 or any kind of education savings plan, it is not reported on the FAFSA because it's not the nuclear family asset. It belongs to somebody else. So that does not go on the FAFSA.
And then that money has to be taken out in a certain time period, right?
The funds are taken out within a certain time period, and those details are really determined by the fund.
Okay.
If it's a MIFA fund, because I know they have their own 529 or whatever it's called. So if it's that, I don't know who it would be, but yeah, if it's the grandparents who set it all up, then it's not reported on the FAFSA. Yeah, thank you. That was a good question. I was going to say that when I was going over the education thing, but you can only say so much, and it just kind of gets lost in the wind. Anybody else have anything? If anybody has anything personal that they need to talk about, I will stay behind. I just want you to know that I am suffering a little bit from a cold, so you don't want to get too close. But I will help you out as much as I possibly can. Thank you so much for your
I think we have a
attention.
question up at
Oh, I do, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
So any sort of MIFA loans or grants, those can be used in any school, not just Massachusetts? Or those,
That is correct. I don't believe MIFA has grants, but when you apply for a MIFA loan, yes, of course, that can be used at any school. It doesn't even have to be a Massachusetts school. It can be used for out of state. So, yeah. Yeah. Good loan. Anybody else? Sorry, I didn't see you. Okay.
Thank you,
Very good.
Diane, for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for coming. I know this information is a lot. I think my one piece of advice for the parents of the room is your students are working really hard on their college applications. They are starting to feel a little overwhelmed and stressed. We're seeing it in guidance. If you could take this process off of their shoulders, I think that would be a huge lift. I know that that's a lot. They can start the process, but in terms of like wrapping their head around all this financial stuff, it's like, so if you could sit down with them, go over it with them, I think that would be a huge help. So any questions for me, I'll be hanging around too, so please let me know if I can help. Thank you.